Hey, Matt Wilson here for my second video of the weekend. I'm gonna do Bob Seger today. Now you guys know that I'm CD only, right? I'm not a vinyl guy, unlike 99% of the other guys on YouTube who are doing shows like this and all they show is their vinyl. And Bob Seger is not well represented on CD, not his classic 60s and early 70s stuff. Anyway, I say classic. Some of the LPs could be better, but he always had great songs scattered amongst even the more, off the beaten track albums. So I'm going to do the best I can today to bring you up to 1980, the Against the Wind album. Of course, from Beautiful Loser on, all those albums are on CD. They're easy to find. So let's begin. I'm going to start with this wonderful disc that came out a few years ago. Bob Seger and the Last Heard Heavy Music. It is just a compilation of his first, 5 singles. He did stuff before this too, guys, with other bands, Ballad of the Yellow Beret or whatever. That's not on here. That's interesting. Anyways, you got to have this because these songs are classic kind of, mid to late 60s thumping garage band sounding hard rockin' Detroit rock music. All right? Heavy music, that was a classic 45. You get part 1 and part 2 on the 45 mix. This is nice remastered sound. Great 45, which was later on one of his albums, Smokin' OPs, which I'll get to in a few minutes. East Side Story. There's a vocal version, and then there's an East Side Sound, which is an instrumental. East Side Story is another great. This band he had, The Last Heard, I don't think they never got to make an album, but they had these classic singles, which were pretty much only regionally successful. I say regionally successful, but he was really successful in Detroit. Not even the rest of Michigan, so much. I know he wasn't that successful in Chicago, but he was a king in Detroit. Chain Smoking is pretty good, and he wrote all these songs, by the way. Persecution Smith is, like his kind of take on protest singers and whatnot. And then Vagrant Winter, again, I don't know if you can really see that well, but get this CD if you buy nothing else that I'm going to be talking about on this show. All right. It is not an album. It's a collection of the first 5, or probably maybe the only 5 45s that he did with The Last Heard, which was his band, before the Bob Seger system. All right. I don't know why he and his manager Punch agreed to have this released when he hasn't done anything else, from the years after, but whatever. Okay. Let's move on now to the Bob Seger system, of which there were 3 albums, none of which are classic, but they're interesting. This one, this is the Bob Seger system, Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. I'm going to be showing you guys these things. These are CDRs that people made for me. I don't know if this is on CD or not, but 25 years ago, whenever you could first burn, CDRs, I had a guy who had all of these albums on vinyl. I didn't even know him. I think I just knew him online. He burned everything for me. So that's what I'm going to be showing you. Some of these albums, they've never been on CD that I'm going to show you my CDRs of. See, they're just CDRs. Anyways, this is a pretty good album. It has the classic Ramblin' Gamblin' Man song, which I think is the same as the 45 mix. I don't know. Although I think this is a stereo mix. This album, I would love to have all. You could do the Bob Seger system, all of their release material on 2 CDs. I don't know. Again, it would be a dream of mine to have Bob and Punch give the okay to release these, but he's never going to because of the Noah album, which I'll get to in a second. But this album's pretty good. Tales of Lucy Blue is the next song, which the album was originally going to be called that. That's why the cover looks like she's a Lucy Blue type of girl, right? And it's got 2 + 2 = great song. Not as good as the mono 45 mix, though. If you can get that on CD, I don't know where you could do it, though. Anyways, pretty good album. Though those 3, I think, are by far and away the best cuts. But when you play it, it's a hard rockin' kind of psych album, you know, very much of its time. Strong debut, though. Now I have the same guy made me this. This is the next 2. This is Noah from '69, and then Mongrel from 1970. Okay, Noah. Seger hates this album. For some reason, I guess, I don't know. Maybe Ramblin' Gambling Man, the album didn't do that well. But they let this other guy, Tom Neame, N-E-M-E, Neame, I guess, Nemi, be like the leader of the main vocal guy in the band. And we have Noah. You know, that was a 1969 album. And it ain't that good, folks. Noah's a great song. That's a Bob Seger song, though. The rest of these songs, you know, Intravenous Eyes, Lonely Man, Loneliness is a Feeling. I'm not even going to read them all. Death Row was good, though. That was the B-side, I want to say, of 2 + 2 =. No, it's not even really a Bob Seger album. Seger hates it, so he's obviously never going to release that. So my dream of having all 3 of these albums on 2 CDs with the 45 mixes included as bonus tracks will probably never come to fruition, but, you know. And then Mongrel's pretty good. Cut for cut, Mongrel is certainly as good as Ramblin' Gambling Man. Song Rufus is good. I love Evil Edna. That should have been, I would have loved to have heard that on the radio at some point. Highway Child, Big River, Mongrel is good. Lucifer's really cool. And then they do another, you know, long version of River Deep, Mountain High. Nobody ever did that song as good as the Spectre production, you know, of Tina Turner singing it. But, so, Ramblin' Gambling Man and Mongrel are good albums with Noah having a good song or 2. But still, one can only imagine you can put all of these on 2 well-remastered CDs with the 45 mixes, and it would, yeah, I would be happy. All right, so moving on. Okay, the next 2 I have, he for some reason got them out of order. It's the next 4 albums, but you know, they're not in the right order. So I'll just talk to you about these. Brand New Morning is 1971. That's like his singer-songwriter album. It's kind of acoustic. He had gotten rid of the Bob Seger system by then, and you know, he's like a singer-songwriter, which is not his best, you know, way to present himself. It's not bad. I know guys that really like this. I like that song, Brand New Morning. Otherwise, I'm looking at these songs. Nothing is really sticking out to me. So, Seger doesn't like the album, so he's not going to release it on CD. So, okay, you know. Now I got to go to this one and do Smokin' OPs. I think Smokin' OPs was briefly on CD. I don't have it. I've just got this CDR. Smokin' OPs is smoking other people's cigarettes or doing other people's material, which he does on here. Bob, the big singer-songwriter, is doing an album of other people's stuff, except for you do get heavy music on here. So that's the time that heavy music, and I think it is the 45 mix too, but maybe not, because that's a mono 45. I'm fairly sure that it's in stereo here. But otherwise, you know, it's Bo Diddley, Love the One You're With, If I Were a Carpenter, Hummingbird, Let It Rock. He does a good version of Let It Rock on the Live Bullet album, though, doesn't he? Turn On Your Love Light, which the Dead had been doing for a while. Jesse James, Someday, and then, of course, heavy music. So there you go, Smokin' OPs. That came out in 1972. Now I need to go back to this twofer to show you. Back in 72, which came out in 73. That one's fairly good. Fairly good in that it's got some great songs on it for once. which he hadn't had great songs on one of his albums probably since Mongrel, unless you like Brand New Morning. He does a decent version of the Allman Brothers' Midnight Rider. Rosalie is on here. Turn a Page is on here. I've Been Working is on here. Those are great Seger songs. Rosalie, of course, done in an outstanding manner by Thin Lizzy. Turn the Page would be a FM radio staple when it was done live on the, Live Bullet album. So Back in 72 is his first strong album under his own name in the 70s. All right? But even better is 7. 7 is his first strong album, period. All right? Right here. Get Out Denver, which has been called one of the great, Chuck Berry cops or lifts in history. Not that Chuck Berry wrote it, but he could have wrote it. It sounds, like a Chuck Berry song. Long Song Coming is good. Cross of Gold. Actually, the whole thing is pretty good. Upper Middle Class. Yeah, 7 is his first solid album where you go, God, other people need to hear this record. It's not just a collection of 2 or 3 good songs. The whole thing is pretty good. So again, dying for a CD release. I don't know if 7's ever been on CD. Some of these albums I think were briefly released on CD or released on CD in other territories, but they're all it's difficult to find. I can't think of another artist of Seger's stature for whom he has as much disdain for his back catalog. It's money in the bank. I mean, he could just. Well, now we're past the age of physical media, but he could have released all these albums on CD back in the 80s, 90s, even the 2000s, and he'd have made some coin. But Bob Seger is a contrary figure, I guess. Okay, that is the last of my CDRs, I want to say. Yeah, because Beautiful Loser, which he's back on Capitol here. I think Brand New Morning was on Capitol. This is just a regular CD. Now, I said that 7 was his first strong album. This is strong too. You heard these songs on the radio growing up. Beautiful Loser is great. Black Knight is good. Kathmandu is great. Jody Girl is great. Traveling Man is great. He does a good version of Nutbush City Limits. Some of these songs are on the Live Bullet album, but you heard them on the radio. I think in the 70s you heard some of the studio versions, or it could have just been the live versions. Sometimes my memory isn't what it could be. But for a CD, which they made, you don't have to just get the vinyl or get some kind of bootleg. I would recommend you guys pick up this album. Beautiful Loser, solidly crafted songs. In 1976, which I've often said is not the greatest year for classic rock, it was a great year for Bob Seger. He blew up that year. First, we have the epic Live Bullet. Now, I love this album. This is another, classic 70s double LP recorded in, Cabo Hall in Detroit from an adoring, worshipful hometown crowd where he was as big a star as anybody. I'm going to go over these songs because they're all done in virtually their definitive versions on this LP. For all of, for instance, Bruce Springsteen's celebrated live prowess, he doesn't have a live album that's good. Isn't that funny? Nutbush City Limits, Traveling Man, Beautiful Loser, Jody Girl, I've Been Working, Van Morrison, right? Turn the Page, the definitive version, right? But I just said that these were all. UMC from the 7 album. Bo Diddley from the Smokin' OPs album, right? Ramblin' Gamblin' Man. Heavy Music. Kathmandu. Looking Back. Boy, did I mention Looking Back? That's a standalone 45, right? From 71. That should be on CD. That 45. Get Out Denver and Let It Rock. Chuck Berry. Wow. Every song epic. The album is epic. You know how I love live albums. I'm not convinced this isn't his best album. There you go. I still would want some of those 45 mixes, but this is classic. Here's my DCC Steve Hoffman disc of Night Moves, which this is his, by all accounts, this is his best album, unless you don't want to hear the FM, you know, tracks that were so popular in the second half of the 70s and still. Listen to these songs. Rock and Roll Never Forgets, you know, that's like the anthem of, you know, aging, you know, rockers. Night Moves, that's perhaps his most famous song. Fire Down Below, Sunburst, Sunspot, Main Street, heard that all the time on the radio. Come to Papa, that was a hit too. Ship of Fools and Mary Lou. Cut for cut, it's hard to argue that this is not his best album, but I'm not sure if it's my favorite, you know? You could make a compilation of pre-1976 Seger, you know, album cuts, standalone 45s, which to me would be my favorite Bob Seger stuff, rather than the hit stuff on from 76 on. But if you just want like an album, a non-Bob Seger's Greatest Hits compilation type thing with songs that you know, I'm going to say it's Night Moves. I'm going to say it's Night Moves. Okay, virtually as good is Stranger in Town. It's just the regular remastered CD. Almost as many famous songs as on Night Moves. Hollywood Nights, still the same. Old Time Rock and Roll, which is made famous by Tom Cruise, and Risky Business. Well, that's not true. It was a famous song before that. Feel Like a Number. We've got Tonight. I mean, that's as many famous songs as on Night Moves. So just a hair's difference between this and Night Moves. This is 1978. He didn't do anything in 77 that I know of. All right? All right? If you're a Bob Seger fan, I'm sure you are, man. And the last one I'm going to leave off with is Against the Wind. Now, I like Against the Wind. I just got some criticism at the time as like Seger was beginning to sell out. But I mean, from Night Moves on, he was always like a commercial songwriter. His style didn't change that much. He did 2 other albums in the 80s, which were filled with hits and sold a lot. He did a live album that sold a lot too after this. But I'm going to stop this show with this album because this is the last one I own. The Horizontal Bop, you heard that on the radio. You'll Accompany Me, ditto. Her Strut, ditto. Against the Wind is the big classic from this album. Bailou's Getting Out Tonight. I mean, Fire Lake. This is as many famous songs on this record as the last 2. So it's kind of like functions as a trio, as a triptych of big Bob Seger records. So, Bob Seger, in the interest of full disclosure, because I always want to be honest with you guys, he was not a favorite of mine growing up. He was all over the radio, or at least the 76 stuff on was all over the radio. But I used to call him Boring Bob, you know. All those guys, Springsteen, Bob Seger, later on it was Tom Petty, and even after that it was John Mellencamp. I kind of lumped together, you know, some of those guys are East Coast, some of those guys are, you know, Midwestern. Tom Petty was from Florida, but they were all like, you know, very American sounding singer-songwriters who, you know, of course did their own material, but kind of had that meat and potatoes kind of sound to them where they weren't going to push the envelope. They just were happy to make music for, you know, beer drinking, Camaro driving, you know. I know that I'm painting in very broad strokes here, but I got into Bruce fairly quickly because his genius was apparent. It took me longer to get into Bob Seger because at the time when I was a kid, I didn't know the earlier pre-76 stuff. Hardly, I mean, they played Ram and Gamma Man on the radio, but none of the other great 45 probably got too much airplay. But when I did begin to realize that he was a very competent journeyman who worked hard and made a lot of great music before his breakthrough in the mid-70s, I appreciated him more. And now I do think he's great, you know? So he's a guy whose reputation would have been bettered had they released this stuff that I just showed you on CD with good sound a long time ago. Failing that, a Bob Seger box set with everything remastered, you know, and it would have had all the 45s and the key album tracks. That never happened either, you know? So if you're a CD guy like I am, it's difficult to be a big Bob Seger fan. But, you know, I do have those CDRs, and I showed you, and hopefully I've enlightened you to a thing or two about the great man's career, at least in the 60s and 70s. So until next time, Matt, signing off.